leaving off an action unless the people see you, such as prayer was the example that he gave, is that unless the people see you, you don't pray. This is associating others with Allah because you're not praying for Allah, you're praying for the sake of the people. And so you're making them the object of your veneration. You're looking for your reward from them. As the one hadith said, is that Allah says, I have no need of the people's partners. So on the day when he's awarding the value of the rewards for the good deeds that are done, he tells the people that joined others in worship with him, joined others in seeking their rewards, say, go to those people you were looking for to be seen by and see what you can get from them, because I have nothing. I have nothing to offer you. I have nothing to offer you. So it's very important. But he says, then there's the hidden aspect of Riya, the hidden aspect. And this is what he's talking about now, is that this other degree of Riya is something that is not open in the same way, but it's seen through its signs, because you don't see it in the actions itself, but you see it in the signs around the action. Amongst the things that he mentions is sometimes the way people, and I think we might have mentioned this last week, I don't remember exactly, people sometimes carry themselves in a particular way to, without saying anything, make people realize that they're being righteous. So they'll dress a particular way, they'll allow themselves to look excessively tired, or their complexion has changed because of the extensive worship that they're involved in, etc., or their lips even become cracked because of the fasting or whatever. So that without saying anything, they make an effort for the people to notice. And so this is one of those subtle aspects that falls into the aspect of Riya, that he gets into, etc. And amongst the things he talks about is he gives one interesting example, and this is an important one for us to take notice of, is that sometimes people, they'll exert themselves at trying to keep what they're doing secret, to have those, as we've spoken many times in the past, having those private moments between you and Allah, where you do whatever it is that you choose to do in those moments, whether it's prayer or fasting or tilawah or whatever, etc. And you keep those things away from the people's eyes. But he says these same people, they keep their worship away from the people, but then when they come amongst the people, they have this certain attitude about themselves where they're expecting for them to be given the salam first, or that the people, they give them special treatment, because nothing they say, but inside themselves, they're nursing this expectation that they should be honoring me because of what I'm doing that they don't know about. So if you think about it, it's a little crazy in and of itself, actually, because you're keeping it hidden, but you're expecting them to praise you and to laud you and to do special, treat you special because of those hidden things. So it's this, again, a very hidden, subtle aspect. But if we're honest, we know that this happens to people. It happens to us maybe even sometimes. We've done something special. We've tried to be extra good. And when we go amongst the people, if we look, this is where we always have to pay attention to the subtle movements of our hearts, to notice if there's a certain feeling when somebody doesn't do something a particular way for you, and something inside you goes, like flinches, like it hurts. Then it's like, what were you expecting? What were you looking for from that interaction that seemed to cause you some pain because they didn't salam you first, or they didn't get up and give you their seat, or something like that. So this is one of those subtleties that we have to be very mindful of, etc. This is the thing. This is the thing about traveling the spiritual path requires us to be very much in tune with ourselves, in tune with our hearts. We have to become accustomed to listening to the voices from our hearts, the thoughts and the reflections of our hearts, so that we can notice the subtle changes in the heart. If you can't notice it, then you can't do anything about it. He goes on to mention the forms of hidden Riya that's so dangerous that faithful people, he mentions, this is important. He says that when it comes to hidden Riya, these subtleties of the heart that happen, that cause this, is that you have to be extremely careful about it. So much so that he says the righteous, the ones that are known for their righteousness, they are so cautious about exposing their good deeds to such a degree that it's even more than the common people are with hiding their sins. They hide their good even more than the common people hide their sin. They're so concerned about exposing their good and letting any opportunity for this desire to be seen to creep into it, that they keep their acts of worship as hidden as possible, trying to be as, and we've spoken a lot about this in previous times, about examples of fasting where even your own family doesn't know you're fasting, or prayers and things like that that you do where you're praying and nobody knows. Obviously, we're not talking about the maktubat. We're not talking about the 5 prayers. We're talking about anything other than the 5 prayers. The 5 prayers, you absolutely want to make sure that, that whenever possible, people are with you when you're praying, because this is best. This is best. So he talks about this, and he brings up a point that is interesting to note, because the question becomes, is feeling good about people witnessing what you do, is this dispraised? Is it praised? Where is it? He says it can be either or. It can be either praised or dispraised. And he brings a couple of examples in statements of the Prophet ﷺ. The first one he brings actually is weak, but he mentions that. He mentions the fact that it's weak, and he says, but there are other explanations, there are other hadith that explain the meaning and confirm the meaning that was in the hadith that he brought. The one that he brought that was weak, he says that for him, now this is talking about somebody who's doing good and hiding his acts from the people, but then it becomes known by the people. It says that for him is 2 rewards. The reward of keeping it secret and the reward of it being public. And so this is the one that's weak, but there's other hadith that he mentions that carry the same meaning. And so amongst those, the 2 that he mentions, makes mention of one where the Prophet ﷺ is saying, Antum shuhada'a lillahi fil ard. Is that you are the witnesses for Allah upon the earth. In other words, you are there to witness what good is being done, so that you will be the one to testify according to the good that is done. And so you will be a witness for those things that have been done. And so the fact that people see it and then they'll witness for that is something that Allah created. And this is an authentic statement found in the Sahih of Bukhari and Muslim, actually. And the other one, this is one that's very, some of us, I think we probably already know, it's talking about somebody who his deeds become known and the people praise him for what he's doing. And the Prophet says, explaining what that is, says that tilka ajil al-bushra lil-mu'min, is that this is a hastening of good news for the believer. In other words, it's not just that your only reward will be in Jannah, but that Allah hastens for us sometimes the part of the reward for our good in this world by causing us to receive the approbations of the people. We don't do it for the sake of the people. We aren't seeking that. And this is an important point, is that, again, these states of the heart, these matters of the heart, our intentions as to what it is that we're seeking. We don't do things seeking their rewards or their pleasures or their praise, but if it comes, we realize that this is from Allah, and that this is a hastening of a reward. And just as I was getting ready to come up here, I was thinking about this subject, etc. It's for me, it's a little awkward to present this subject, because here I am sitting in front of a group, and there's at least a 50-50 chance that the camera is on as well. So what part of this might constitute Riya? What part of this is sincere? And so, and this is, it seems a little strange, but these are the kind of questions we need to ask ourselves, is how much of this is sincere? How much of this is being done for notoriety, being done for likes and shares and things like that, etc. How much of that is truly being done, for the right reasons? So it's an advice to myself as I do this as well. So he's talking about it, and one of the last points that he makes was whether or not this Riya, this hidden Riya in particular, can destroy your deeds, can cancel them out. And he said, if you complete the deed, and then this feeling of pride or of wanting that it was seen by people or something like that comes afterwards, then you're safe. It hasn't done anything to the deed itself because it came after the deed. It's not to say that it's still not something you should probably look to and pay attention to and deal with, but the fact that it didn't happen during the deed doesn't destroy the deed. But then the way he writes it is that if during the deed this thought comes to you, and it's more than just a passing thought, but it settles in and it causes you to change, like for instance, if you're praying, you begin to recite more beautifully, or you extend your qiyam, or you extend your sujood, you change what you're doing because you notice that somebody's watching, and we've spoken about this, how we should treat the rest of creation when it comes to the acts of worship that we do. He said, then this cancels the deed. Now this is his opinion, his writing. There are other scholars who have written on this and saying that if, for instance, you're standing up to pray, you stood up to pray without consideration of other people. No one was in the room, you stood to pray because you intended to stand to pray and you were standing for Allah to pray. But then somebody comes in the room and you beautify your recitation, or you lengthen your qiyam, you lengthen your sujood, then some of the scholars say that your salah is still complete and is accepted, but the extension of the sujood or the beautification of your qira'ah, this is not. And so Allah willing, that is a more generous opinion, a more generous ruling based on those things happening if it comes into the middle. But if it comes that you weren't going to pray anyways, and then it only came because of that, again, this is coming into something much more that will violate and exhaust the deed entirely. But again, this also is approaching near to shirk as well. So it's very dangerous. And again, the states of our own hearts is one of the most important things for us to pay attention to. And this is why, as much as the hadith about intentions is so casually thrown about and repeated, it's there at the beginning of the books. It's repeated so often. And some of you know that Ibn Mahdi, one of the things he said that is narrated in the commentary on the hadith of intentions is that if I was to write a book, I would place this hadith at the beginning of every chapter in the book as a way of reminding the reader and the author of the importance of the intention at each step along the road. So that's not for no reason. That's because being in tune with our intentions is so critical. It is the very foundation of all of these matters when it comes down to it. That's why it's so important. That's why it's so often talked about. But sadly, we kind of just brush right over it. Even, and I'll end on this point, even with Al-Fatiha is a similar thing. We all know Al-Fatiha, alhamdulillah. We take it almost for granted sometimes. But the Prophet ﷺ told us that it's the greatest surah in the entire Quran. If it's the greatest surah in the Quran, and we read it 17 plus times a day at a minimum, don't you think we should spend a little more energy in understanding it, digging into its treasures and understanding? The scholars, they said that Al-Fatiha is a summarization of the entirety of the Quran. This is why it's referred to as Ummul Kitab, the mother of the book, because it is a foundation. So we shouldn't ignore these subtle, seemingly simple concepts. As I often would say, when people would ask me certain questions, I'd give them the answer, and it'd be something very short. They were expecting a long explanation. I say, it's that simple, but it's also that hard. Al-Fatiha is that simple, but it's also that hard. There's so much to be there. You look actually, and I said I would close on this earlier, but I say I'll close on this now. Just to give you an example of Al-Fatiha and what the depths that are there in Al-Fatiha. I have at home a book that I'm still sadly far behind on reading, which is Tafsir. It's a translation, but it's a Tafsir of Al-Razi. Some of you are familiar with Sheikh Al-Razi from the past. So this is only the Fatiha. That's the first volume of the translation is just Al-Fatiha. It's 400 pages long. 400 pages on Al-Fatiha alone. Do you really think we've plumbed the depths of Al-Fatiha? There's so much there. So much there. Digging into these core concepts, our intentions, and things like this is critical. So I pray that Allah guides all of our hearts to be sensitive to the state of our heart and the place of our intention so that we can guide our hearts and bring them back with the help of Allah, as always, so that we stay away from this hidden shirk. And even there's a dua that I was reading in my preparations. The gist of the dua is that it says, "Oh Allah, I seek refuge with you from associating things with you knowingly. And I seek your forgiveness from doing so unknowingly." So may Allah grant us that state. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Inshallah, next week we'll start talking about remedies for the state of Riya.